right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all for joining me for today for another rousing episode. No pun intended, maybe every pun intended. I'm not quite sure. But I hope everybody out there is doing well. For those of you who are new to the podcast, this is a question and answer-based podcast. If you have a question about OCD and anxiety stuff, and you would like some random person on the internet answering those questions that maybe slightly more qualified than somebody on Reddit, or maybe slightly more qualified than your cousin or something like that, or just someone on a forum, send them to me. I'll put them up on the internet, talk about them, yammer on about them, and I'll do my best to try to point you in the right direction. So if you have a question, you can send it over to me. Go over to fearcastpodcast.com and you can send a question over there. You can click on the submit a question link, and there's some information, and there's a way to do that there. You can also send an audio question over at the fearcastpodcast.com website. You click on the speak pipe button and record your question. It sends directly to me. You can also send it over to Instagram. I am Fearcast Podcast over at Instagram, and you can send me a question that way. And I believe that is how the question for today is coming in. The question today came from Toblerone Girl. That is the name that she is going by. Now, if you're nervous about this, again, you give me whatever name you would like to use, and if it's appropriate, I will use it. I'm looking at some of you people out there sending me questions. Anyways, send in your question, and audio questions go to the tip of the top of the list. Y'all know that. That is why Toblerone Girl's question is coming in today. So before I get into that, I'm just going to share my excitement with the weather. Now, some of my Southern California people don't appreciate weather. They like it sunny, and they like it just kind of nice, and like 80 degrees, and like, I can just kind of go outside with a T-shirt. It's raining all week, and it's been bonkers rain. Like, now, all right, other people in the country I know are getting crazy snow, and you all get weather and lightning and, things. We don't. This is a wild novelty for us, and I'm here for every second of it. I love it. Lightning is happening, and the crazy wind, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Are we all going to crash our cars? Maybe we are. But you know what? It's going to be a lot of fun weather. Oh, it's been great. Plus, it means that I get to stay at home and sit on our giant, we just got a new couch. It's a giant new couch. And I get to sit on that and watch movies. And I feel like I'm doing some solid parenting. Y'all didn't ask for this. I'm doing some solid parenting lately. Does that mean that I'm like setting boundaries and like communicating with my kids, like doing, like taking them on activities that they like? No, none of that. But what I am doing is introducing them to Star Wars. So I tricked them into watching the first two Star Wars. Now, the first two, by the way, is episodes 4 and 5. I don't want to hear episodes 1 and 2 as the first ones. I recognize they exist. I know that they have a place in it. But okay, the first couple 3. Let me just tell you about 1, 2, and 3. All right, episodes 1, 2. If they cut out like 30 minutes of just fight scenes, and they brought the camera in, tightened it up a little bit on just the action, those movies would have been 100 times better. Now, I'm also not here to be mad on the post 3. What is that? 6, 7, 8. Wait, 7, 8, and 9. Yeah. I like them, and don't get mad at me about they're too funny. Have you watched Star Wars? They're hilarious. They are very funny. They're very intentionally funny. And if you think that they are ruining your childhood, it means you had a bad childhood, all right? If a new movie with new characters is ruining your childhood, I'm sorry for the childhood that you had and the expectations that you thought life was going to give you. And welcome to the podcast that we're dealing with things that sometimes suck in life, like mental health. Yay! We're going to wrap it around, everybody. We're bringing it around. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Toblerone Girl's question is long. She acknowledges it. It's long. It's good. I'm leaving all of it in, but it is long. So buckle up. Here's her question. We're dealing with sexual orientation OCD and ROCD. I've got to come up with a name for the intersection between these two, and we've got to come up with something because they go hand in hand together. So, all right, let's play her question, and then let's get onto my answer.
Hey, Kevin. Thank you so much for your podcast. It has been such a good help to me. Like, you're amazing. And I just want to say thank you for being incredible in all the work you're doing. It's so helpful to everyone. I just wanted to see if I could get, some thoughts from you about what I've been experiencing for the last, say, year and a half, 2 years. I believe I have OCD. I believe I've developed OCD. I don't have a diagnosis of it, though, but have suffered from anxiety for a very long time. So last year, just to actually give some context, I got married in 2024 to my husband, who I've been with for 7 years this year, who is amazing. But yeah, since I got married, I feel like what I've been struggling with is relationship OCD and sexual orientation OCD. And it kind of kicked off because really, I've never had attraction to women in terms of relationships or anything like that. No romantic feelings for women. But throughout the course of our relationship, my husband and I have sort of experimented with threesome kind of fantasies in the bedroom, which have been, I've enjoyed them, he's enjoyed them. I've watched lesbian porn. We've watched it together. And then it got to the point that I felt like I needed that to be aroused. And that started to spin me out in terms of questioning everything and going, well, what does this mean? All of that. And that just would stress me out. And then I would sort of think to myself, well, it's not a big deal because a lot of women watch lesbian porn, and if threesome's a kink, big deal. It doesn't need to mean anything. But then it kind of developed into, getting groinal sensations looking at some women. And then I'd be like, well, is that real arousal or not? And I think some of it is genuine arousal. And some of it is, I think, anxiety. I'm not really sure, though. It's hard to say. I definitely find men attractive as well. And it's only specific situations I kind of feel like I get particularly aroused or feel like the groinal sensation, shall we say, if it's not arousal, is about women. I might be watching a TV show with a hot woman and I'll be like, oh, well, she's hot. Oh, what does that mean? And then it'll be it'll just go into that rumination. So that got really bad. And then it made me question my relationship with my husband. And if I should be with a woman, all of those things. And I've listened to so many of your podcasts now about all types of OCD, but specifically relationship OCD and sexual orientation OCD. And it's been helpful. But I guess without a diagnosis, it's hard to really know, is this actually OCD? Because it's been horrible. I'll think that, I'm attracted to my female friends. And then, I'll see a man that I think is attractive and I go, well, clearly I'm not gay. I just, yeah. I've never had sex with women, just to be clear. I've never been drawn romantically to women. But it's this underlying fear, which I guess is, what you've spoken about. The fear that you're not knowing yourself. I guess for me, a fear that maybe my marriage won't work out because of some of this. And then, I've tried to think, okay, well, I could be bisexual. Let's just leave that there. But then, of course, it's well, no, my brain just won't accept that. It's well, you're one or the other. And I just can't, accept it. Or my brain can't accept that it could be, just ambiguous, if that makes sense. I am in therapy, but I haven't undertaken any exposure therapy or any proper kind of OCD treatment because, like I said, I don't have a diagnosis, but I strongly believe that's what I'm going through, and it's been so hard because it'll make me like really spin out. I recently, in October last year, so for the last 3 or 4 months, I've been on a SSRI antidepressant to sort of help with my anxiety that my GP gave me. So I haven't been to a psychiatrist to get a test or anything. Yeah, so since being on the medication, it's much easier to control my thoughts on this, like, antidepressant. But, like, I know what's genuine attraction and what's not for me. And, like, of course, it's going to pick on my female friends and, like, all this stuff. So the rumination is still there. Even on the medication, it just doesn't stick. It just doesn't stick to my brain. Like, the thoughts won't hang around. I'm able to distract myself and just go, yep, okay, and then move on. But, yeah, I think it might take a bit more than just being on this medication and doing the therapy I'm doing because, you know, I am seeing a therapist who's not trained in OCD. It's helping a bit, but like I said, without a diagnosis or anything, it's hard to know because I haven't done any exposures, therapy or anything like that. Because, yeah, I just chosen to see if I could go without and just kind of see what happens. But, yeah. The biggest thing is when it's like I'm questioning if I have, you know, lost attraction for my husband, if I'm like, you know, if I'm actually having feelings for my friends, which I know I'm not, you know, all those things. Like, I genuinely want to make my marriage work. I want to be with my husband. It's just been really crap. And I'm just, yeah. The intrusive sexual thoughts about women and just generally about my relationship have just sort of taken over. And while they're much more managed now because of the meds, I'm just sort of like, I need something else. Like, I need to do something. So, yeah, I'm hoping you can just give me some guidance. Thanks again, and I'm sorry that this is getting really long and has been long. Okay, bye.
All right, Toblerone Girl's question, or Toblerone Girl, thank you so much for this question. This is a great question, and I love the accent. I love the accent. Who doesn't love a good accent? Am I right? I'm bummed because I can't get Siri in my car to have an Australian accent. Oh, if I said it, it's probably going to be mad at me. It's probably going to try to activate. Anyways, I said the name. It's like saying Beetlejuice. It just shows up. I'm also in my head now about my Star Wars rant at the very beginning of this. Maybe that was too much? It's too much. If you disagree with me on Star Wars, message me. We can have a whole argument. I'll air all of it. I think that sounds like a super fun kind of maybe a segment is let's get into arguments about nerd things. If you have strong positions about Harry Potter as well, if you are a Christian out there who has strong opinions about Harry Potter, we can have an absolute overlap between religious scrupulosity and nerd culture. So let's do it. All right. Let's get on to the question, though. All right. So Toblerone Girl. I'm just going to call you Toblerone. I feel like that's going to be easier. Anyways. All right. So I'm going to, first off, for diagnosis, there are plenty of ways to go and get a diagnosis. I mean, you can certainly talk to your therapist about this that you mentioned that you are seeing. Ask them to administer a Y-box. It's YBOCS. So it stands for Yale Brown Obsessive Compulsive Scale. That is going to be the gold standard, the industry standard of diagnosis for it. Now, there is going to be a severity scale, and sometimes you'll find a symptom checklist. Typically, they'll do the severity scale, and that's a good way to kind of measure, how severe OCD symptoms are. 7 and under are subclinical, which means that all people will rank on it to a certain degree. How much degree, I don't know, but they rank a little bit. So you can go up to 6 and have some traits, but isn't considered clinical at that point, right? But 7 and above, it is. It's a really good measure just to kind of gauge, how much, and then re-administering it over time starts to show the reduction of symptoms, which is very fun and very encouraging. I think the symptom checklist is a little bit more useful in terms of treatment. From my perspective, I think it's a little bit more helpful because it really helps to focus on what are the areas of compulsion, what are the areas of obsession, and then it gives us kind of more targets. Now, there are options out there. If you just Google, I just Googled online Y-box test free. And there are a couple of websites who do have Y-box. They're going to be severity scales because it's easier to show, easier to kind of diagnose and kind of lead you to say like, all right, I do have OCD and it's in the extreme or mild or whatever level you're at. There are some websites that will require your email address. Ignore those. Just ignore those. But some of them are free. You can also find, and I was going to say, I checked my website. I will put one on Cal OCD's website. That's my private practice, calocd.com, for California OCD and Anxiety Treatment Center. I'll put one up there at some point, just for people to have access to, because I think it's helpful. But you can also check out Jonathan Grayson's Freedom from OCD book. There is a symptom checklist in there as well. I believe there is also a Y-box, a regular Y-box. Sorry, I'm distracted outside. It is wildly raining, and there is a squirrel that is rapidly trying to get into a Capri Sun. This might be he's down running across the street with it. This might be the most entertaining thing that's happened to me all day. It's early in the day, but, still stands. All right, so you can go check those things out and talk to your therapist about this. All right, so as I've mentioned, so you already suspect that you have ROCD and sexual orientation OCD. So you said you've also – I appreciate you listening to the podcast and all the kind words. That isn't I do hear it. Thank you. But it's there are what am I even trying to say? You're suspecting there is OCD. Certainly talk with your therapist about this, but also, are you listening to these podcasts over and over again? And I'm sure, you mentioned mine. I'm sure there are others that you're listening to. Are you listening to try to give yourself confirmation that, yes, I do? Because at some point, you've listened to the podcasts enough to round up to most likely there is. All right, because it sounds like you're gravitating towards this, and at the very least, it sounds like there is something afoot, right? Something going on. So I want to point that as a potential compulsion. All right, but let's start getting more into this. So first, I want you to try to rethink what the problem might be, right? I want you to start to think about the uncertainty in the situation, the uncertainty of the thought as the problem, not the content of it, right? You've heard me talk about how I think OCD isn't really a thought problem. It is a feeling problem, right? So for example, if you could probably have these thoughts all day long, but if it didn't come with that feeling of uncertainty or doubt or fear or terror or whatever verbiage you want to use, you probably wouldn't care, right? Because you and I and everybody else out there, we've got crazy thoughts all day long. We've got wild thoughts all day long, and we generally don't care. But when it comes to an obsession, comes to a fear, it comes with that feeling, right? And it's the feeling that motivates people to take action, right? And that's where the compulsions come in. So I want you to start to think about it as the uncertainty, right? Because if it was just about a title, right? You've talked about in this that you do notice some genuine sexual attraction, right? You said you've watched lesbian porn. You and your husband have experimented with threesomes. I don't know if those threesomes were, two women and a man or two men and one woman. I don't know. You didn't mention, at least I don't think you mentioned the I don't know, the personnel involved with these, but, there is some openness, right? So the title, though, doesn't really matter. And this is the most frustrating thing. And this is where OCD and sexual orientation OCD loves, right? It wants people to be in this clear and clean box, but I don't know why it never accepts bisexuality as a viable option. It just rejects that. It's like, no, it has to be either straight or gay. And if you're not straight, this is generally speaking, it's like if you're not straight, oh my gosh, that's a terrible problem, right? Or, if you're identifying as gay, you goes, oh no, but I'm not 100%, so, a 7 on the Kinsey scale or whatever the number is. That's a problem. As if to say that, again, that bisexual can't work, right? I wish the terms that OCD would accept terms like bisexual or heteroflexible or just open or sexual omnivore or sexually non-binary, like whatever it might be. But the OCD kind of says, like, all right, with this title, What if I'm wrong, right? You talked about like this kind of feared story. What if I'm wrong? What if I've made this terrible choice in my life? What if I don't really know myself? What if I discover something about myself that will be my life's undoing, right? And it just goes, oh no. Because if you could satisfy it with just this title and say, well, yeah, I'm not in this binary. I'm not strictly straight or not strictly gay. I am, I have one foot in both camps. I don't know what the case may be. But that's where you've kind of come to. That's where you've acknowledged as true about yourself. But OCD ain't having it, right? So one thing that I want to so we talked about just kind of what those feared stories are, right? That feared story is kind of that uncertainty. Well, what if? It's that introduction. It's the invitation into fantasy. Is what if? What if dragons exist? What if I win the lottery? All these are fantasies, but it says let's step out of reality into fantasy land and explore something that isn't true, or that could be true, could happen, but isn't happening now. Right? So what if something terrible is going to happen to you, for you, about you, because of you, whatever it is? And that uncertainty, could be easily done with a simple answer. But that's where it's an anxiety disorder. And that's where the cycle keeps continuing. If you could just answer it and then move on with it, you'd be done with it, and we wouldn't be talking. But we are. All right. So one thing to consider in this is before we jump into other things, is there any reason why accepting those terms isn't okay? So something to perhaps unpack with a therapist is there any religious issue, any family of origin issue, any social reasons why accepting that title or that label is unacceptable? Now, I'm not saying there is or that there always is for people, but sometimes there can be a limitation, or not a limitation, a hesitation to accepting those terms because of something else. And you're kind of going through this compulsive cycle to try to resolve that stuff as if going through, the compulsive machinations is actually going to resolve that, where sometimes there's just some processing in that area that needs to happen. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I'm just throwing it out there as one of those options. Okay. So again, OCD says the solution to your uncertainty is by understanding your sexuality. If you just truly understood yourself, then you could get on with life, right? So you do. You think about it. You consider it. You weigh the pros and cons. You evaluate your emotions. You compare other people, right? You compare your feelings when you look at other people, right? Now, typically, a lot of times, sometimes we would get to a conclusion and go, I kind of lean over here, and we go, okay, that's who I am, and move on. But again, OCD ain't having it. It says you've gone through that process, but it still says, you know what? I know you came to a conclusion, but let's just think about that again. Or what if the situation was different? What if it was a different what if it wasn't that woman you were attracted to? What if it was this whole other woman? What if it was this fictitious person who has all these different traits? What if they were the person that you were going to be attracted to and was going to make you leave your husband? Could that be it? And so it just draws you back in with more and more what ifs. And all these are, existential questions that if you really wanted to think about and enjoyed thinking about it, have at, go to town. But it sounds like that process is engaged with urgency and need and kind of a life or death sort of vibe to it. That's where it's becoming a problem, right? So the reality is the solution is recognizing that this is OCD, tolerating the unknown aspects about it, the unknown aspects about the future, right? What if I discover something? What if I eventually make a mistake? What if something bad happens? And also that kind of the inconsistent and unresolvable feeling of doubt that shows up. That's kind of what we're having to sit with, right? So I want you to think about it in that sort of way as you start to move forward. All right. oftentimes in treatment, we're going to go through kind of this challenging thoughts process. So this is called the cognitive restructuring piece within CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's where we look at the thoughts, look at the situations, and start to challenge the legitimacy of it, look at any cognitive distortions that may be at play, kind of think about it as a kind of screwy thinking or kind of skewed thinking. And we try to come to a place that isn't going to resolve it or make you feel all of a sudden better, but help you have a more grounded, more fact-based understanding and acknowledgement of who you are, where you're coming from, what your goals are, all that stuff. And the goal of that is to kind of get this grounding so that you can jump off from it into exposures or jump off from it into some of these further exposure or exercises. Now, for some people, that can be compulsive, that can be problematic. For some people, it can be, it can feel like reassurance seeking, and it is to a certain degree reassuring. It's reassuring of what you believe and what you trust to be true about yourself. Now, going through it once and then moving forward with that information as if the alternative thought is true is great. But when you go over it and over it and over it, that's where it starts to become problematic, is if you're trying to do it to change the way that you feel, and that's going about it the wrong way. Think about it as it's going through the class and signing the waiver before you go skydiving. Right? You're going to go through the class and they're going to teach you all about the mechanics of it and how to skydive and what the safety protocols are and why they do the things that they do. And then they're going to have you sign this waiver that talks about the safety of it, but also talks about how you can go splat. And then from the understanding that you have about the process and about the safeties of it and the dangers of it and the likelihoods of it, hopefully you have the confidence to then jump out of a perfectly good plane, potentially to your death. Right? So think about it as that. But it's kind of like saying, if we just keep going through the class over and over and over again, it's not going to change the statistics. It's not going to make it safer for you. It's just, you're just going through and through and through, hoping to get the courage or hoping to not feel anxious about jumping out of a plane. You're going to feel both, the nervousness and the willingness to jump out. That is what we're looking for. Okay, so it certainly is an option, right? But I also want you to accept your compulsive conclusion. You messaged me, or you sent the question in because I assume you believe that you. What am I trying to say with this? You don't buy the narrative, right? It's not fitting with you. It's not jiving with you. So there's something off. So you're trying to fight against this thing, and it's just not sitting right with you. And over and over again, you're trying to maintain this truth about yourself, that you're not gay, that maybe you fall into a bisexual category, or again, sexual omnivore. I think I like that term a lot. I think it's funny, but whatever. I'm going to get an email about it, I'm sure. But email of judgment, anger, probably. All right, but that's what you're trying to maintain because that's what you believe to be most true about yourself. Act as if it's true. If it were true, would you pay attention to the voice that says you need to fix this? Would you pay attention and give it credibility and fight against this narrative that you potentially are potentially are gay and need to do something about it, need to get reassurance? You probably wouldn't. And that's the idea. Trusting yourself and then taking the risk to not engage that narrative. Now, of course, this is easier said than done, but that's part of that. But that's part of the process is you're trusting what you rationally believe about yourself rather than outsourcing your confidence to the absence or presence of anxiety, the absence or presence of a feeling. Okay? All right. So I'm going to move forward. Maybe you've guessed this. I'm going to move forward as if you do, in fact, have OCD. I know you said you weren't diagnosed on this. But everything that I talked about here, I want you to run by your therapist, all right? Not just necessarily say, well, from, the 5-minute question that you sent in or whatever it was, that I know everything about you and everything about your history. Run this stuff by your therapist and see if it jives with what they're doing, with what else they know about you. And I think that's a safe thing to do with everything that I talked about on this podcast. I don't know everybody's story. I don't know your story. And, there might be a reason that your therapist is having you do a certain thing, maybe a very good reason why they're not having you do a whole other thing that I might talk about. that might be helpful for somebody, but maybe not for you. So again, this is all about information and all about just trying to equip you, trying to build a confidence that there are things that you can do, but run it by your therapist to see if that's something that would be beneficial. So as we move forward, we definitely want to consider that, or start with the consideration that we want to reduce compulsions, right? Reducing compulsions is going to be the most effective thing that you can do to start out. And even in the long run, if you were to do anything, resisting, minimizing, or eliminating compulsions is going to be the best thing to do. So one of the ways you can start doing that is by just simply tracking, keeping a log, pen and paper with you all the time. Everyone typically has their phone with them. Start monitoring what you're doing. Now, if you just Google OCD compulsions, you'll find a giant list of them. There are going to be external compulsions, like you talked about checking, right? You talked about kind of evaluating your feelings, right? That's kind of this covert compulsion, right? It's something that just happens inside your head. You check within your body. It may not be something that other people would see. That would be more of an overt compulsion, right? Like washing your hands is an overt compulsion, right? We all see it. But the covert ones is the stuff that's just going in your mind, and it sounds like you're doing a lot of those, right? I have an article on mental compulsions. You can go check that out. It's got a bunch of options there. My good friend Lauren Rosen just published a book on mental compulsions, so that might be something worth looking into for yourself. And just kind of monitoring and being really aware of the things that you tend to do that are compulsive in nature. Then checking, or as you notice what you're doing, you'll start to become more aware of when you fall into it. And when we fall into it, it's not an opportunity to beat yourself up. It's an opportunity to say, oh, I'm doing this thing again. What is a different tact that I can take? Because I could keep going down this road and keep ruminating and stressing and checking and all that. Or can we notice that we are doing this thing and do something different? At any point in the process, you can do something different, right? So it's not like, well, I've been doing this for an hour. Well, I guess I might as well do it for another hour. The idea is if you've been doing it for an hour, okay, we catch ourselves. We understand. We give ourselves grace and compassion that, all right, you fell into this trap again. Yeah, of course you did. This is hard, right? You've developed this over time. You've reinforced this process over time. So instead, we're just going to gently shift over and do something else, right? Part of this comes with accepting the presence of these thoughts, right? And the acceptance of these thoughts and acceptance of the question or the doubt or the feelings, their groinal sensations, there's an intentional, consistent choice to let the thought be there without judgment, without rejection, without avoidance. It's saying, yeah, this thought is there. I know that it is there. I don't like it. I don't love it. I didn't want it there. But I'm also not going to put my dukes up against it and try to fight it or shove it out of my head or try to close my eyes about it or try to quickly, frantically replace it with something else or do something to neutralize that bad feeling. We're saying this thing is there, right? This thought is there. So I want you to notice then, when the thought arises, what is your reaction? Is there judgment? Is there tension? Is there avoidance? Is there immediate action to try to resolve it or to understand it or to categorize it, right? To say like, oh, no, this is a safe thought, or no, this one's bad, so I need to do something about it. Instead, can we take that step back and just say, this is a thought. This is a feeling that I have. Oh, there's that one, right? And notice that you have a choice to engage with it or to engage with other things, right? We always have a choice on what we're going to think about, right? I could ask you to think about your favorite gym teacher. If you have gym, I don't know if every school has gym, but what was your favorite gym teacher? You probably weren't thinking about him or her before this, but now you are, right? And now we can say, all right, now let's think about your favorite Disney movie. I don't know if you have one. What's your favorite Disney movie, right? Now, thinking about your favorite Disney movie may not immediately kick out the thought about your gym teacher, but that gym teacher thought is going to start to diminish as we start to shift our focus to the Disney question. And then as we move on to something else, the other thought is going to slowly drift out too. Now, if we try to force ourselves to think about something so that we aren't thinking about something else, that would be avoidance, that'd be thought suppression. We're trying to not do that. What we're optimally doing is trying to re-engage with life as we would like to be living, all right? Now, part of this acceptance of thought, right, is we can just simply notice the thoughts that are there. We can go like, yep, that thought is there, right? Just like I look outside. Yeah, it is raining outside, right? I look at, my mustache and go, yep, there are hairs that are going all over the place. Maybe not the way that I would like it, but they are, right? They are. You might notice the physical sensations that are there, and you can label that to yourself. You can say, all right, right now I'm having groinal sensations. I am. Or there they are, right? Or, hey, I'm noticing that I'm having this feeling. I'm noticing that I have this mental image in my head, right? It can just simply be a word, right? It can just be like groinal sensation. It can just be attraction, right? It can be anything like that, just to notice that it's there. And once you notice that it's there, we can then reconnect to what's happening around us. Because we then don't want to go off into fantasy land with this thought and go into the evaluation and go into the comparison with the past or the future or worrying about what might happen. Instead, we want to say this thought is there, but what else is there? Well, I see cars outside, right? You see the picture in the background if you're watching this on YouTube, right? Maybe you're at the gym, so you see other people at the gym. You hear the sounds around you. I tend to ground to sound. Right? So when I'm grounding and really trying to connect with my environment, I really hone in on the sounds around me and noticing subtleties. And, is there wind? Are the air conditioning is on around me? Can I hear the rain outside? Are there things that are far away? Do I hear my own heartbeat? Right? You can kind of hear that in your ears. So some people do it with smell. Some people do it with sight. It's really going to be up to you, but it's really about grounding yourself to the moment. So spend some time just anchoring yourself to this moment. Not to try to edge that other thought out, but to kind of hold them in tension together. Next, I want you to then re-engage with life. Re-engage with that TV show. Re-engage with the conversation with your husband, right? So you want to actively engage with life without the expectation that the anxiety or the urge or the invitation to obsess is going to immediately pass. I promise you it will. It will over time. But it's going to linger for a time. And we're going to let it linger. And then eventually, as we get involved with life, as we spend as little time with this as possible, our brain will kind of get bored with it and move on from it. So that's a process that we can expect. So that's a process that you can do as you're just engaging with life, right? Not intentionally trying to do exposures, but as you're just engaging with life. So next. So with exposures, now, again, work with your therapist on this, right? Because what you're going to do is you're going to build a hierarchy, just kind of this master list of all the situations that bring up your triggers. When I do this, I like to monitor what are the triggers and what are the corresponding compulsions that you tend to do in those situations, so that you can then think about, like, how anxious would you be if you were to do the trigger or encounter the trigger without doing the compulsion, right? And then that's the stuff you're going to start to monitor. So it might start with you just by writing the word gay, or writing the word bisexual for that matter, right? And maybe it graduates to, once you can think about that word, write that word, and have your anxiety of that word drop by at least half. Perhaps then you can write the word, well, maybe I'm gay. Maybe I'll never know, right? And that may be triggering for a time, and that eventually starts to come down. You might intentionally acknowledge other people are attractive without without engaging with resistance, right? You might just simply notice that other people are attractive as you're walking down the street or in an office building or in class, and just go like, yeah, that person is attractive, right? Yep, they are. And that's going to be uncomfortable, but the more you practice it with men, women, everybody, it's going to become easier, and the anxiety is going to become less and less. I would challenge you to do that like 100 times a day. That's a lot, right? But I'm willing to bet over time your brain is going to go, oh, acknowledging somebody's attraction isn't dangerous, right? Now, you don't need to call everybody attractive, but call people attractive that you think are attractive. There are people out there who are not attractive. And just because you are straight doesn't mean that you find everybody in the opposite sex attractive. And just because you're gay doesn't mean you find everybody in the same sex attractive. There are people that you're attracted to and people that you're not. And that's okay. That's what we call normal. All right. As we keep going on, watch those shows with those specific actors that bring on anxiety, right? Do things differently than you normally do. To that fear that, like, maybe I don't know myself, right? Do stuff that you don't normally do, right? Bringing your husband on this, right? Talk to him about, like, what do you normally do? And then what would be crazy? What would be weird for you to do? And then Practice doing those things. Maybe you discover something about yourself that you didn't know was there. Maybe you do. Does that change everything about you? Or does that just kind of leave things as like, all right, this is this new thing. But you discover that you can do things differently, right? Okay. Another exposure thing is that you could do. You could lean into them. Right, lean into those thoughts. Right, if you notice that a friend is attractive, right, and you may have attractive friends, I bet you do. So notice those attractive friends, and in your mind, you can say, you know what, I'd do them. Now, that might be uncomfortable, and that may not also be true. You may not eventually do them. I don't know what your story is or what your I don't know what your agreements are, but it's like you can just go like, yeah, I'd do them. It's going to be uncomfortable, and the more you say it, the easier it will become. You can lean over to your husband if you're watching a show and there's this attractive person that comes on. Lean over to your husband and just go, I would totally leave them or leave you for them. Yeah, I would. And that's going to feel uncomfortable, and hopefully they can be in on the joke and on the exposure as well. And that's something to think about. So lastly, you can always engage with scripting. So I got to cut this off because I think my computer's about to die. I hope some of those ideas were helpful. I know they were just very quick, kind of this broad overview, but hopefully this has been helpful. And again, I would encourage you to talk to your therapist about this and start thinking about different ways to approach this, perhaps working with an OCD therapist on this as well. But hopefully this gets you going and gives you some things to think about and potentially some things to practice as you, again, start pushing into this. But again, developing a different relationship with these thoughts, with the feelings, and so that you can go forward with life and forward with the life that you want to be living and spending less time with these obsessions. So thank you so much for this question, and best of luck. Thank you for listening to the Fearcast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at fearcastpodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@fearcastpodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at fearcastpodcast on Instagram. If you like the Fearcast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to fearcastpodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.